On the surface, their life was the American dream, a beautiful home in the suburbs of Oakwood Creek, Georgia, thriving careers, a love story that seemed ripped from a romance novel. David and Simone Carter were the couple everyone admired, the epitome of Black excellence, grace, and success. But beneath that polished veneer lay a marriage crumbling under the weight of ambition, neglect, and secrets. And in the quietude of their perfect life, a storm was brewing that would shatter everything, culminating in a crime so shocking, the town of Oakwood Creek would forever remember the day their dream couple became a real-life nightmare. David Carter, 42 years old, a brilliant architect whose designs were transforming the skyline of Atlanta. Driven, meticulous, a man who built his life with the same precision he used for his buildings. From humble beginnings in rural Alabama, David had worked tirelessly, earning scholarships, enduring long hours, and finally achieving the kind of success his parents could only have dreamed of. His career was his pride, his refuge, and increasingly, his obsession. And Simone Carter, 40 years old, a powerhouse in the marketing world, known for her innovative campaigns and infectious energy. Originally from a vibrant, close-knit community in Charleston, South Carolina, Simone brought light and laughter wherever she went. She was the social butterfly to David's focused intensity, the splash of color in his carefully planned world. They met at a mutual friend's wedding, a whirlwind romance followed, a passionate connection that seemed destined to last forever. Their early years were a blur of shared dreams and building a future. They supported each other through late nights at the office, celebrated every promotion, and poured their combined energy into creating their perfect home in Oakwood Creek. It was a symbol of their success, a sanctuary they built together. But as their careers soared, the foundation of their relationship began to show cracks. David's late nights at the office became more frequent. Business trips stretched longer. His mind, even when he was home, was often still in the world of blueprints and deadlines. Simone, initially understanding and supportive, found herself increasingly alone in their beautiful, silent house. The laughter they once shared dwindled. Intimacy became a forgotten language, replaced by tired excuses and growing resentment. Simone was a woman who thrived on connection, on being seen and desired. As the emotional distance between her and David grew, a void opened up, a space that yearned to be filled. And as fate, or perhaps just proximity would have it, someone was waiting in the wings. Marcus Hayes, a senior account manager at Simone's firm, charming, attentive, and unlike David, seemingly always available. He'd always been friendly with Simone, their professional paths often crossing. He listened when David was too busy. He complimented her ideas, her style, her very presence in a way David no longer seemed to. It started in Oakley. Late nights working on a big project, shared meals, commiserating about work stress, a shoulder to lean on. But emotional intimacy can be a slippery slope. For Simone, starved of affection and validation at home, Marcus's attention became a potent balm. What began as a professional friendship slowly, almost imperceptibly, shifted into something more. Stolen moments after work, hushed phone calls, the thrill of a shared secret. The line blurred, then vanished entirely. The affair began subtly, a secret life woven into the fabric of their demanding careers. Simone was racked with guilt, caught between the husband she still, somewhere deep down, loved, and the validation she found in Marcus's arms. She told herself it was temporary, a fleeting escape from a suffocating reality. But the longer it went on, the deeper the deception became, and the harder it was to untangle herself. While Simone was navigating this treacherous double life, David was becoming increasingly aware that something was wrong. He couldn't pinpoint it at first. Just a feeling. Simone was more guarded with her phone. She was often working late, even on nights when their schedules were usually free. Little inconsistencies in her stories. A new lightness in her step sometimes, followed by unexplained irritability. David, the architect who noticed every structural flaw, began to see the cracks in the facade of his marriage. His meticulous mind, usually focused on building, turned its attention to deconstructing Simone's behavior, searching for patterns, for answers. Suspicion gnawed at him, a slow, corrosive poison that eroded his trust and fueled a growing paranoia. He started checking her car mileage, glancing at phone bills. Though he found little concrete proof, Simone was careful. The emotional distance widened into a chasm. David felt himself retreating, unable to confront his fears, unwilling to face the potential truth. He buried himself deeper in his work, the one place he still felt in control. Meanwhile, Simone and Marcus's affair continued, fueled by stolen moments and the adrenaline of secrecy. They grew bolder, convinced their deception was impenetrable. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves. And sometimes, the most devastating truths are found in the most mundane ways. The meticulously constructed world David and Simone had built was about to come crashing down, not with a bang, but with the quiet ping of a notification. It was a Tuesday evening, a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. David was working late in his home office reviewing blueprints. Simone had said she was at a networking event. His phone buzzed, a notification preview, a text message. It wasn't addressed to him. It was open on Simone's phone, which she had carelessly left on the desk beside him. The words on the screen blurred, then snapped into horrifying focus. A message from Marcus H. Pet names. Plans for a future rendezvous. A clear, undeniable confession of a deep intimacy that had nothing to do with networking. In that single moment, the meticulously built structure of David's life, the one he had so carefully designed and constructed, crumbled. The years of subtle doubts, the gnawing suspicion, the increasing paranoia, it all converged into a single, agonizing point of impact. He didn't rage immediately. There was a chilling stillness. A profound silence in the house seemed to amplify the roaring in his ears. Something inside David Carter snapped. It wasn't a sudden explosion of hot rage. It was colder. A quiet, terrifying detachment. The architect, known for his precise planning, began to calculate. The man who built structures was now contemplating how to dismantle a life. What happened next was a deviation from anything anyone who knew David Carter could have ever predicted. It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't a tearful accusation. It was a descent into a darkness he had kept hidden, perhaps even from himself. The shocking event wasn't just the crime itself, but the chilling, methodical way he approached it. Simone returned home later that evening, a little flushed, perhaps from a hurried goodbye with Marcus, perhaps from nerves. She walked into the seemingly calm house, calling David's name. He was waiting, not with anger, but with a chillingly blank expression. The confrontation was brief, devoid of the dramatic shouting one might expect. David presented the evidence, the phone. Simone's face went ashen. There were pleas, tears, desperate attempts to explain, but the man standing before her wasn't the David she knew. His eyes were distant, his voice unnervingly calm as he spoke words that sealed her fate. The act itself, the moment life was taken, was brutal. A swift, violent act born not just of rage, but of a deep, cold sense of betrayal and calculated retribution. But the truly shocking part was the silence that followed, and the chillingly efficient way David Carter, the master architect, began to construct his perfect crime. The following morning, David Carter woke up in his perfect house alone. The grim reality of what he had done settled over him, not with crushing guilt, but with a renewed, terrifying focus. He had a problem to solve, a body to dispose of, a life to meticulously erase, and his skills as an architect, his understanding of structure, planning, and concealing flaws were about to be put to their most horrific test. His plan was audacious, cold, and designed to leave no trace. He knew the house, every inch of it. He knew the local area, its secluded spots, its waterways. He began by cleaning every surface, every potential speck of evidence, systematically eliminated with the same care he'd take to protect a new building from the elements. The body of Simone Carter needed to disappear, permanently. David knew a conventional burial was too risky. Incineration is too difficult and traceable. He needed a method that would return her to the earth, leaving nothing for forensic science to find. His solution was as disturbing as it was meticulously planned. Over the next few days, David maintained a chillingly normal facade. He went to work, attended meetings, fielded calls. He told friends and family Simone was on an impromptu business trip, a common occurrence given her job. He texted her phone, knowing it would go unanswered, creating a digital alibi of concern. No one suspected the man calmly going about his day was concealing a horrific secret. Meanwhile, his gruesome work continued in secret. He used his architectural knowledge to his advantage, understanding materials and how they react. The process was slow, laborious, and utterly dehumanizing. He was dismantling the woman he had once loved, piece by piece, turning her into nothingness. This was the shocking aftermath the title hinted at, not just a murder, but the cold, clinical destruction of a human being. As days turned into a week, Simone's family and close friends began to grow genuinely concerned. An impromptu trip without regular contact was unusual, even for busy Simone. They started calling David more frequently, their questions laced with worry. David maintained his concerned husband persona, expressing his own manufactured anxiety. Eventually, the concerned calls escalated. Simone's sister, Danielle, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She insisted on filing a missing person report with the Oakwood Creek Police Department. The investigation into the disappearance of Simone Carter officially began. Detective Miles Corbin and Detective Isabella Rossi were assigned to the case, experienced, sharp, and immediately sensing something was off. Missing persons cases involving seemingly stable, successful adults are always a red flag, and David Carter's calm, almost detached demeanor during the initial interviews struck them as odd. He was cooperative, but there was an underlying lack of genuine distress that didn't sit right. David told them the story of the business trip, provided a timeline, offered access to their home. The detectives found no signs of a struggle, no forced entry. The house was immaculate, almost sterile. Too clean, perhaps. David explained they were both very tidy people, plausible, but the detectives were seasoned. They knew that the absence of evidence could sometimes be as telling as its presence. They began digging deeper. They spoke to Simone's colleagues, who mentioned her close working relationship with Marcus Hayes. Marcus was interviewed. He admitted to the affair, clearly distraught by Simone's disappearance. He provided details about their relationship, including the fact that David was likely unaware. At least, that's what Simone had told him. This introduced a crucial element: motive. The detectives now knew about the infidelity. They looked at David again, this time through the lens of a potentially cuckolded husband. His lack of obvious grief now seemed more suspicious. Could his calmness be a mask for something far more sinister? The investigation broadened. They pulled phone records, emails, financial statements. David's digital footprint was as clean and precise as his architectural plans. No frantic searches, no suspicious communications. He had thought of everything. But every perfect plan has a potential flaw. David's was his overconfidence and the chillingly unique method he had chosen. While the house offered no obvious clues, the area around it became a focus. Had he disposed of something nearby? One seemingly insignificant detail from Marcus's interview stuck with Detective Rossi. He mentioned Simone had recently bought a specific, somewhat expensive piece of jewelry, a unique pendant David had never seen or mentioned. It wasn't found in the house. Had she taken it on her trip? Or was it gone for another reason? The search continued for weeks. Drones flew overhead, K9 units scoured the woods, dive teams explored local waterways. Still nothing. It was as if Simone Carter had simply vanished into thin air. The case began to attract media attention. The story of the successful, beloved marketing executive who disappeared, leaving behind her seemingly perfect life and stoic husband, captivated the public. The pressure mounted on Detectives Corbin and Rossi. They had a strong suspicion about David, but no body, no weapon, and no direct evidence linking him to a crime. They needed a break, and the break came from an unexpected source, linked directly to David's chillingly unique disposal method. David, in his meticulous planning, had acquired specific chemicals and materials needed for his gruesome process discreetly, purchasing them from different stores, paying with cash. He believed he had covered his tracks. But a sharp-eyed clerk at a less frequented hardware store remembered a man matching David's description buying an unusual combination of items. It wasn't the purchase itself that was suspicious initially. but the quantity and combination of materials when the police, following up on all purchases of certain items in the area, came asking questions months later. This led detectives down a technical rabbit hole. They consulted forensic chemists. Based on the purchased materials, they theorized about a possible method of disposal, a method designed to accelerate decomposition and leave minimal trace evidence. It was horrific, but it fit the profile of a killer who was methodical and sought complete erasure. Armed with this theory, the search shifted again, not just for a body, but for residual evidence of the process itself. They re-examined David's property with new forensic tools, searching for chemical residues, microscopic traces that might have been missed in the initial sweep. Their painstaking work finally yielded a result. In a seldom used corner of David's workshop, despite his thorough cleaning, trace amounts of chemicals consistent with the hypothesized disposal method were detected. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a critical piece of circumstantial evidence. It pointed towards David having conducted a disturbing chemical process on his property. This finding, combined with David's unusual calmness, the lack of the pendant, Marcus's testimony about the affair, and the inconsistencies in David's timeline, built a compelling, albeit still largely circumstantial, case. The detectives knew they needed to push. They brought David Carter back in for questioning. This time, the tone was different. They laid out the evidence, the chemical traces, the missing pendant, the confirmed affair, his questionable demeanor. They watched him closely, looking for the cracks they knew had to be there. For hours, David deflected, denied, and offered alternative explanations. He was the master architect, trying to shore up the crumbling walls of his lies. But the pressure was immense. The weight of his horrific secret, and the isolation of his crime, and the focused intensity of the detectives began to wear him down. And then, the dam broke. In a moment of exhausted despair, perhaps a flicker of guilt finally breaking through the cold calculation, David Carter began to confess. The shocking truth, the horrifying details of that ordinary Tuesday night, and the macabre days that followed, spilled out. He described the discovery of the text message, the cold fury, the brief final confrontation with Simone. He confessed to the murder, a swift, brutal act in their bedroom. And then, he detailed the chilling, methodical process he undertook to destroy her body, using chemicals and materials acquired specifically for that purpose, carefully disposing of the residual matter in various locations over several days, believing he was erasing the crime entirely. The pendant, he admitted, had been a final, macabre gesture. He had disposed of it separately, throwing it into a deep part of the nearby creek. The confession was as shocking in its detail as the crime itself. The perfect architect, the man who built beauty and structure, had used his knowledge to meticulously dismantle a human life and erase the evidence. David Carter was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife, Simone Carter. The town of Oakwood Creek, and indeed the wider community, was stunned. The admired couple, the symbol of success, had a hidden life, and one partner's reaction to its exposure was a descent into unimaginable darkness. The trial was brief, the evidence, particularly the confession and the forensic traces, overwhelming. David Carter was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. His architectural legacy was forever overshadowed by the horrific structure of lies and violence he built in his own home. The case of David and Simone Carter is a grim reminder that what appears perfect on the surface can often hide the deepest flaws. It's a story of ambition, neglect, infidelity, and a shocking, chilling response to betrayal that shattered not just a marriage, but a community's sense of security. Simone Carter's life was tragically cut short, her memory forever linked to the dark side of a relationship that promised forever but ended in a nightmare.